My beloved child. Stop scrolling for a moment. Do not move past this message. There is a reason your eyes landed here right now. Not an hour from now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. Because something has been moving behind the scenes of your life for far longer than you realize, and the moment of revelation is closer than it has ever been before. Can you feel it? That strange pull in your spirit. That feeling that something important is approaching. That invisible pressure that has been building inside your heart. You thought it was anxiety. You thought it was uncertainty. You thought it was simply another season of waiting. But there is more to it than that. Much more. For months, perhaps even years, you have carried questions that nobody around you could answer. Questions you barely spoke aloud. Questions you whispered only to heaven. Questions about love. Questions about timing. Questions about why certain connections appeared and disappeared. Questions about why your heart recognized something before your mind could explain it. And tonight, those questions are beginning to move toward an answer. Listen carefully. Because what I am about to reveal is not what you expected. The story you have been telling yourself about your soulmate is incomplete. You have seen fragments, pieces, moments, signs, dreams, synchronicities, unexplainable feelings. Yet you have never seen the entire picture. Not because you were being punished. Not because you were forgotten. But because the truth required time. Some truths cannot arrive early. Some revelations would destroy the very thing they are trying to protect if they appeared before the proper moment. And your story is one of those revelations. For a long time you believed your soulmate was somewhere far away living a completely separate life. But heaven sees differently. The thread connecting both of you has existed far longer than you realize. Long before certain heartbreaks. Long before certain mistakes. Long before certain people entered your life pretending to be permanent. There was already a path being woven. A path invisible to human eyes. You wondered why some relationships never worked. You wondered why certain doors closed unexpectedly. You wondered why people who promised forever suddenly vanished. You wondered why timing always seemed wrong. My child, there were moments when what felt like rejection was actually protection. Moments when what felt like loss was actually redirection. Moments when heaven quietly removed someone because they were standing where your future was meant to stand. You could not see it then. But you are beginning to see it now. And that realization is changing everything. Because there is something about your soulmate that has remained hidden until this season. Not hidden from punishment. Hidden for preparation. The truth is that both of you have been growing through separate storms. While you were learning lessons on one side of the journey, they were learning lessons on the other. While you cried over certain endings, they cried over endings of their own. While you questioned your worth, they questioned theirs. While you prayed for clarity, they prayed for direction. And neither of you realized that heaven was answering both prayers simultaneously. There were nights when you felt alone. Completely alone. Yet at that exact moment another soul somewhere under the same sky was experiencing emotions strangely similar to yours. Not because you knew each other. Not because you had spoken. But because destiny has a mysterious way of preparing two hearts through parallel experiences. This is why certain feelings have been difficult to explain. This is why logic has not been enough. This is why your spirit keeps sensing movement even when your physical circumstances seem unchanged. Something has been shifting. Quietly. Consistently. Powerfully. And now we arrive at the part few people are ready to hear. The truth that has been approaching you like distant thunder. Your soulmate knows more about you than you realize. No, not through conversations. Not through spying. Not through ordinary means. But through something deeper. There have been moments when they felt drawn toward a future they could not explain. Moments when they imagined a person they had never met. Moments when they sensed a presence they could not identify. They dismissed it. Ignored it. Questioned it. Yet the feeling continued returning. Again. And again. And again. Just as certain feelings continued returning to you. Neither side understood what was happening. Neither side possessed enough information to make sense of it. Yet the connection continued developing beneath the surface. Invisible. Silent. Patient. Because timing matters. Timing always matters. You see, there are truths that become dangerous when revealed too early. If you had met before certain lessons were learned, you might have walked away from each other. If certain wounds remained unhealed, fear might have spoken louder than love. If certain battles remained unfinished, both of you might have sabotaged what heaven intended to build. So the waiting continued. Not as punishment. As preparation. And that preparation is reaching a critical point. Can you feel the intensity increasing lately? Can you feel old cycles breaking? Can you feel certain emotional patterns losing their power? Can you feel yourself becoming someone different than the person you were even 6 months ago? That transformation is not random. Every lesson mattered. Every delay mattered. Every disappointment carried information. Every detour carried purpose. Nothing was wasted. Not even the tears. Especially not the tears. Because tears often water the ground where future blessings grow. What you considered wasted years were actually construction years. What you considered empty seasons were actually preparation seasons. What you considered silence was heaven working beyond your field of vision. And now, the distance between question and answer is becoming smaller. Much smaller. Yet there is another secret. One that very few people would believe if they heard it. Your soulmate has been experiencing unusual shifts recently. Moments of reflection. Moments of awakening. Moments that force them to look honestly at their life. Moments that challenged everything they thought they knew. The old version of them is fading. A new version is emerging. And the same thing is happening to you. This is why things feel strange. This is why old energies no longer fit. This is why certain conversations feel different. This is why your intuition keeps whispering that something is near. Because transformation often arrives before revelation. The soul senses movement before the eyes see evidence. The heart hears footsteps before the mind understands who is approaching. And your heart has been hearing something. Even when you tried to ignore it. Even when you convinced yourself you were imagining things. Even when disappointment tempted you to stop believing. Deep inside, a quiet voice kept saying, "Wait. Not much longer. Something is changing." And that voice was not wrong. Because heaven has been arranging pieces. Moving circumstances. Opening pathways. Closing distractions. Creating alignments. Positioning moments. Preparing conversations. Orchestrating encounters. Building a bridge between two journeys that have spent years moving. You have focused on your weaknesses while heaven focused on your calling. You have measured yourself through human standards while heaven measured you through eternal possibilities. Your soulmate story is connected to that purpose. Far more than you realize. Far more than they realize. This connection is not only about romance. It is about transformation. Growth. Healing. Expansion. Becoming. And that is why the truth has taken so long to surface. Because the revelation was never just about who they are. The revelation is also about who you are becoming. But here is where everything changes. Because the countdown has already begun. The spiritual clock is moving. Events are unfolding. Pieces are shifting into position. And somewhere beyond what your eyes can currently see, a realization is forming. A realization that neither you nor your soulmate will be able to ignore forever. When that realization fully arrives, everything will look different. Questions will become answers. Confusion will become clarity. Waiting will become understanding. And a secret that has remained hidden for far too long will finally step into the light. But before that happens, before the final truth emerges, before the veil lifts completely, there is one shocking detail about your soulmate that heaven has not yet revealed. A detail connected to a choice. A choice they recently made. A choice nobody around them understands. A choice that is already changing the course of both your futures. And when you discover what that choice was, you will understand why the last 5 minutes before the truth is revealed may become the most important moments of this entire story. Because what they chose, and why they chose it, changes absolutely everything. And that revelation is closer than you think. Reply, Part 2, when you're ready for the continuation. There is something you do not know yet. Something that has remained hidden beneath ordinary moments. Something that has been unfolding quietly while life continued moving forward around you. The choice your soulmate made was not sudden. It was not impulsive. It was not something that happened in a single afternoon. It was the result of countless nights spent wrestling with emotions they could not explain. Nights when sleep refused to come. Nights when their thoughts kept circling back to the same questions. Nights when they felt as though an invisible hand was pulling them toward a future they could not yet see. At first they resisted it. Most people do. Human beings often resist the very things that are meant to transform them. They cling to what feels familiar. They remain where things feel safe. They choose certainty over possibility. But something inside your soulmate began changing. A quiet awakening. A subtle shift. The kind of shift that starts deep within the soul long before it becomes visible on the outside. The people around them noticed pieces of it. Not all of it. Just fragments. A different look in their eyes. A new seriousness in their voice. A growing desire to understand their purpose. An increasing inability to tolerate things that once seemed acceptable. But nobody understood the real reason. Nobody knew what was happening beneath the surface. Because the truth was far deeper than anyone imagined. The choice they made was this. They decided to stop running. Stop running from their emotions. Stop running from their fears. Stop running from the future. Stop running from the possibility that something greater was calling them forward. You may not realize how important that decision truly is. But heaven does. Because many people spend their entire lives running. Running from healing. Running from growth. Running from love. Running from the very blessings they pray to receive. Your soulmate reached a crossroads. A moment where they could continue repeating old patterns or step into unfamiliar territory. And for the first time, they chose differently. That decision created a ripple. A ripple that began moving through their life. A ripple that eventually reached places they never expected. And somehow, in ways that are difficult to explain through ordinary understanding, that ripple began moving toward you as well. The strange thing is that neither of you fully realized what was happening. You continued living your life. They continued living theirs. Yet beneath the visible world, circumstances were beginning to rearrange themselves. Opportunities appeared. Certain doors started opening. Certain distractions started disappearing. Certain conversations suddenly became important. Certain realizations arrived at exactly the right moment. It was as though unseen pieces were moving across a giant board. Not randomly. Not accidentally. Intentionally. Carefully. Purposefully. And the closer those pieces moved into place, the stronger the feeling became. That feeling you have struggled to describe. That feeling that something significant is approaching. That feeling that your current chapter is nearing completion. That feeling that life is preparing to reveal something you have waited a very long time to understand. The reason that feeling has become stronger is because your spirit senses movement before your circumstances fully reveal it. Your soul notices shifts long before your eyes can confirm them. That is why some days you wake up with hope for no obvious reason. That is why certain moments seem charged with unusual energy. That is why you occasionally feel excitement mixed with uncertainty. Part of you knows something is changing. Even if you cannot yet explain what it is. And now another layer of truth must be revealed. There was a period when your soulmate nearly gave up. Not on life. Not on their dreams. But on the belief that the kind of connection they longed for could actually exist. Disappointment had exhausted them. False starts had exhausted them. Broken expectations had exhausted them. They began convincing themselves that perhaps they were expecting too much. Perhaps real love was only a fantasy. Perhaps deep connection was something other people experienced but not them. Yet every time they tried to fully accept that belief, something happened. A strange reminder. An unexpected feeling. An unusual coincidence. A dream. A conversation. A moment that reignited hope. Again and again these moments appeared. And every time they appeared, the same question returned. What if there is more to the story than I can currently see? That question changed everything. Because questions open doors. Questions create space for revelation. Questions invite possibility. And once that possibility entered their heart, the journey accelerated. The walls around them began falling. The fears began weakening. The resistance began fading. Little by little, they started becoming the person they were always meant to be. Not overnight. Not instantly. Transformation rarely works that way. It happened gradually. Through lessons. Through challenges. Through growth. Through moments that stretched them beyond their comfort zone. And while all of this was happening, you were changing too. You were learning things about yourself that previous versions of you could never have understood. You were discovering strengths hidden beneath old wounds. You were finding wisdom inside experiences that once seemed meaningless. You were becoming capable of carrying blessings that earlier versions of yourself might have struggled to handle. That growth was necessary. Every part of it. Because what is coming next requires the person you are becoming. Not the person you used to be. And this brings us to the revelation that has been waiting in the shadows. The truth that has been slowly approaching throughout this entire message. Your soulmate has started sensing you more clearly than ever before. Not your name. Not your face. Not specific details. But your energy. Your presence. The reality that someone exists who feels strangely familiar despite remaining unseen. The feeling has become difficult for them to ignore. And the more they try to understand it, the stronger it becomes. They cannot explain why. They cannot fully define it. Yet they can no longer dismiss it. Something inside them knows that a major chapter is approaching. A chapter connected to a person they have not fully met. A chapter connected to a future they have not fully seen. A chapter connected to a truth that has remained hidden until now. And perhaps the most astonishing part is this. The closer they move toward understanding that truth, the closer you move toward understanding your own. Because this story was never only about discovering who your soulmate is. It was about discovering who you are. The waiting was teaching you. The uncertainty was shaping you. The silence was preparing you. The delays were strengthening you. Every experience carried purpose. Every challenge carried meaning. Every setback carried hidden wisdom. Nothing was random. Nothing was wasted. Nothing escaped heaven's attention. And now, you stand near the edge of a revelation. Not the end of the story. The beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where questions begin turning into answers. A chapter where hidden things begin stepping into the light. A chapter where pieces finally start making sense. But there remains one final mystery. One final truth that has not yet been spoken. A truth connected to an event that is much closer than either of you realize. An event already moving toward both of your lives. An event that will trigger a chain reaction neither of you expects. When that moment arrives, the signs you once doubted will suddenly make sense. The delays will make sense. The waiting will make sense. The strange feelings will make sense. Everything will connect. Everything will align. Everything will reveal the purpose it carried all along. And when that happens, you will finally understand why heaven remained silent for so long. Because some revelations become powerful only when they arrive at the exact moment they are meant to be seen. And that moment is approaching faster than either of you can imagine.